Christian parenting.
Welcome to the Bible for Kids podcast with your hosts, best-selling children's author Amy Parker and author and co-creator of VeggieTales, Mike Nawrocki. If instilling biblical values in kids is important to you, this podcast will give you the resources, wisdom, and hope to do just that. Now, let's join our hosts, Amy and Mike, for this week's episode.
Welcome back to the Bible for Kids podcast. I'm Amy Parker.
And I'm Mike Nawrocki.
And today we are pleased to welcome Cynthia Yanof, host of the Pardon the Mess podcast, among other things. But before we bring her on,
we start each Bible for Kids podcast with a Bible verse or verses. And today's verses are from Deuteronomy 11, 18 through 21 in the New Living Testament. So commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these words of mine. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your foreheads as reminders. Teach them to your children. Talk about them when you're at home or when you are on the road or when you go to bed or when you're getting up. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, so that as long as the sky remains above the earth, you and your children may flourish in the land the Lord swore to give your ancestors.
What great instructions. Cynthia Yanof is a wife, mom, blogger, and the host of Pardon the Mess podcast. She has a relaxed style of interviewing, combining her quick wit and sense of humor, which I am obviously lacking today, with a firm commitment to never taking herself too seriously. She loves Jesus, her family, foster care, and having lots of friends around her as often as possible. Cynthia is relatable, real, and a friend to all of us just trying to walk the parenting road in a meaningful way that's pleasing to the Lord.
Welcome, Cynthia. Great to have you on.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
It's always great to have other podcasters on. We feel like we're here with somebody who knows what they're doing.
The only one in the room.
Oh,
but,
my goodness.
But
Yeah.
we're excited to announce that we are now network neighbors. The Bible for Kids has moved into the Christian Parenting Network neighborhood. So,
Yes.
can we borrow a cup of sugar while we're over here?
For sure. You can borrow anything we've got, for sure.
Right.
We're so glad to have you guys joining the network. I can't think of a better fit. I love what both of you do. I could sit, again, I'm used to being on the other side of this mic for podcasting, so it takes all I have not to ask you questions. But I will say this, I love what both of you do. Your main hustles. I have all kinds of books sitting here that Amy's written that I read to my toddler. And then I also have the great privilege of having lived VeggieTales for many years because I have a senior in high school that grew
nice.
grew
Very
up
cool.
VeggieTales. I have a middle schooler that grew up VeggieTales. And then I have this 4-year-old, my late edition. And literally, we pulled out the videos, still have them. Like they're probably, totally old school. Have those in the car, and he's watching them. And
Goodness.
Love what you guys do. So thank you, first of all, for having me on, but also just thanks for what you do. And we're so thrilled that you're joining our network.
Oh, well, thank you. And
please tell your kids Larry says hi.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is going to be it. Of all the things people I've interviewed and things I've done, this is going to be the 1-second blurb that will make me famous in this house.
So
I don't do voices, but
you do a great impersonation of Amy Parker. The other thing we definitely share along with Sugar is our passion for providing practical and spiritual resources for families. So can you tell our listeners more about how that works, about Christian parenting, and about the resources you offer at Christian Parenting?
Absolutely. And that's what we're trying to do here is we just want to bring together fellow believers, Christians that are trying to raise their kids in the Lord. And I think right now, I know I'm raising 3 of my own kids. We're all trying to do this well. And I think as culture is diverging more and more away from biblical principles, that's good and bad. Obviously, that's not ideal, but at the same time, it allows us to let the light shine, right? It's brighter in this. And so coming together as parents, raising kids who know and love the Lord, that's our goal with Christian parenting. But we're trying to do this in a perfectly imperfect way. That's kind of our tagline, perfectly imperfect. And I don't know about you. I was interviewed on a radio station the other day, and they started it by saying, Cynthia Yanof's here, an expert in parenting. And I was like, oh, wow. Clearly, he has not met my children. That's what we want to do, is just bring people along with us as we are raising our kids. And let's do it from a perspective of knowing that we don't have it all together. But the Lord's going before us. He is for us. He's with us. He's fighting on behalf of our families. And when he's for us, who can be against, right? And so what we do with that is we have everything. If you go to christianparenting.org, you're going to see everything from blogs, resources, books. I just wrote a prayer journal that follows the school year. We just have all these different opportunities. And then we've added on our network, which we're so happy you're part of. And with the network, the idea is that you can kind of have one-stop shopping. It's the target of Christian parenting podcasts. You jump in, get what you need, and we're going to have all kinds of people on there. Great people like you guys. My podcast is on there. We've got Jonathan Pitts coming on, and he talks a lot about losing his wife and suffering and single parenting. We will have people that can speak into raising teenagers, sitting with your newborns. Whatever that looks like, you can find what you need to resource you in the Lord. And so we want it to be fun, practical, spiritual, all those great things, but one spot. So that's what we're going for.
That's awesome. Jinx. So perfectly imperfect. So I want to just settle in on that for a second. I think we are all feeling a lot imperfect right now. Just with having kids at home. I had to kick my 16-year-old out of the office, just to do this podcast. And we're just all making this up as we go, or as some teachers said, we're building the plane as we fly it. So tell us the thought behind perfectly imperfect. If you're setting out to create this tagline, to create this brand, why is perfectly imperfect representative of your brand?
Well, that's just it, is that there's no perfect parents out there. And I think you have to be really careful when you get into parenting advice, because no one is raising a child just like mine or yours. All of us have different kids. God created them uniquely and differently. And so it looks different in how we parent them. But one thing stays the same, and that's God's standard. And what's interesting is over the years, how the standard of parenting has changed, right? Like when we were growing up, our parents send us packing out front, and they were like, be back at dinner time, right? No cell phones. I mean, I drove home from college 12 hours without a cell phone, because we didn't have them then. I think back of that. One of my favorite stories is when I was young, my brothers, they were a fairly heinous bunch, but I love them now. We're all good. But I was out front riding my new bike, and my brother threw a broomstick through the spokes. You can imagine what happens then, right? I go,
wow.
flying
That's not
off.
Good for rotation. Yeah.
Not good. And I remember going into my parents, and I have great, wonderful, godly parents. But I told them this, and I was all upset and bruised up, and they were like, all right, well, let's not do that anymore, to my brother. And that was it. And I think about that today, you guys. If one of our kids did that, we'd be looking for the best counselors. We'd try to be figuring, we would be going down 70 steps of how they are going to end up in a really bad place someday. And that's what I think with this changing culture, and there's always this changing guide of what's the right, I'm air quoting, the right or the perfect parenting. What we want to do is just embrace the fact that God's standard is the standard we're going to follow. And at the end of the day, if our kids can walk out of our house and they know the Lord, right? And we can give them that kind of faith that stays with them. And we look at what they're going to be 20, that's what we're going for. We're going for that feel of hey, they're going to say thank you and appreciate me when they're 20 and what I've done to point to the Lord, not today necessarily.
Right.
Then we're looking at the long game. So that's what the goal is. We're perfectly imperfect parents. We're going to get it wrong. I get it wrong pretty much all the time. I'm sure I can name 10 things this morning that I won't. But if we come together and we can just accept the fact that in our weakness that Christ is strong, I think that's where it's at. And so that's where we're shooting for.
You know where I went when you talked about childhood is the bench seats in the back of the big Buick LaSalle, and all my brothers would be lined up, and then one of them would be up in the windowsill, on the back, just laying there. Nobody's in seat belts. It's a different world.
It's a different world. It's funny, even because I have this big gap in my kids. So I have a 17-year-old, and then I have a 13-year-old, and then I have a 4-year-old. Even within that, I laugh at the fact that when our 4-year-old, or now when he was a baby, he came in our house, and I hadn't had a baby in a long time. We adopted him. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I remember we laid him on their stomach, and then we went to their back, and then we went to their side, and like, now should I just stand him up? I don't know. Just having this big gap between my kids, seeing how it's changed. But yeah, when we were kids, like I just laugh. If someone would have told my parents the things that to do that we're now doing, they would have been like, now come on, we have jobs, we have a life.
But doesn't that also give you this great perspective when you have that span of kids? You know, I have a 10-year span between mine, and even the pediatrician advice changed. These people are professionals. They're telling us how to raise our kids, or at least how to treat them physically. And even that advice changes so night and day. So it just gives you this perspective that, you know what, even the people with all the answers don't have all the answers. And I think that just gives you a little, well, it's an epiphany as a parent, and then it just gives you a little bit of grace for yourself that, okay, I don't have to know everything. I don't have to know whether I feed peas or carrots first. That they're going to turn out okay.
And similarly, if you do all the things that are correct, that are right, again, air quoting that, there's no guarantee that it's all going to look how you want it to look when they're adults. And so that's just the beauty of freeing yourself up and just saying, hey, I'm giving it back to the Lord, and we're just going to follow what his best is for our kids and trust them to him. So it's a gift to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And it's already time for a break, guys. So we will be right back on the Bible for Kids podcast.
Get swept away by God's awesome story with the Epic Bible. This graphic novel-style Bible features dramatic illustrations created by some of DC and Marvel's best comic book artists. Whether someone is reading the Bible for the first time or looking for a fresh perspective, the Epic Bible's cinematic storytelling will make God's Word come alive and reveal His redemptive plan for all humanity. Perfect for teens, comic book fans, and graphic novel readers. The Epic Bible, God's Story from Eden to Eternity. Available for pre-order wherever books are sold.
Imagine a world where children of every hue know they are equally created in the image of God. This, friends, is God's heart revealed in His Word. A quote from Dorena Williamson. In her beautifully illustrated book, Colorful, author Dorena Williamson tells the story of two best friends who are learning to celebrate their different skin colors. As they look around them at the amazing colors in nature, they can see that their skin is another example of God's creativity. This joyful story takes a new approach to discussing race. Instead of being colorblind, we can choose to celebrate each color God gave us and be colorful instead. This book includes a parent connection, an easy tool to help you discuss the book's message with your child. You can also visit www.bhkids.com for a free, colorful, downloadable activity journal to help you and your kids grow deeper in your faith and understanding of kingdom diversity. Colorful is available wherever books are sold.
Hey, Bible for Kids listeners, we're always looking for ways to give away free resources for you to use with your kids. So look us up on social media and find out what's going on our Instagram and Facebook page at The Bible for Kids.
Welcome back to the Bible for Kids podcast, and we're speaking with Cynthia Yanof.
So, Cynthia, tell us about your podcast, Pardon the Mess. What prompted you or inspired you to start it? I know that podcaster hasn't always been your career. So tell us a little bit about your background and then why Pardon the Mess? Why a podcast?
Sure. It's interesting. I am a lawyer by trade. I practiced law for many years. And one day I always kind of tell this as my second testimony, but I was sitting in my office in downtown Dallas on the 40th floor, looking out the window and just kind of put my head back. And I was like, God, I just feel like you're prompting me that there's something more. I don't know what that is. But whatever it is, I want to be faithful to it. Let me know, what that is. Redirect me if that's what you want. And just that sense of holy discontent. And again, there's nothing wrong practicing law. Thankfully, my husband still does, and it pays the bills, and I'm thankful for that. But I knew then that the Lord had something different. And so through a series of just praying through it and fasting and waiting, a lot of waiting. You know how the Lord works. It's a lot of waiting sometimes. And I just knew He was taking me a different direction. I ended up working for Christian Parenting, just out of the blue, a phone call of someone that knew someone that had heard of me. And there's nobody less qualified in the whole world to host a podcast than Cynthia Yanof, which tells you how the Lord totally that's where he steps in, right? And he
You went all Moses.
Yes, totally. And I'm like, okay, if you need a legal contract and appellate brief, how can I help you? But a podcast, what are we talking about? And I'm not super technologically strong, which makes it even funnier that I have a podcast. But anyway, over time, the Lord just kind of directed me towards, I started writing for them. I've written resources, some books and things for Christian parenting. And then we decided to start a podcast. And I never envisioned that I would host it, but that's just kind of how it went. And here we are a couple of years later, close to 1 million downloads. And it has been just a gift to be able to talk to some of just the most amazing parents. I mean, everyone from Bob Goff to Priscilla Shire to, Michael W. Smith to you guys. I mean, it's been so fun to talk to people and just talk about what it's looked like on their parenting journey. And Pardon the Mess came from just the whole idea of, I do not want anyone to think I've got it together because, who of us does, right? And so just being able to laugh about it and be quirky and say, this is hard, this is a hard road, but we want to walk it together with you. And that's kind of the origin of Pardon the Mess. So it went from law to Christian ministry to podcast. And here we are today with Pardon the Mess. And it's just been a super great gift. Thankful for all the people that tune in. Surprised every time anyone listens to anything that comes out of my mouth. I bet you'll me too. But super grateful.
And it's so refreshing to hear from a trained lawyer as well, because you figure if anybody's going to have it together, have all their I's dotted and their T's crossed, it's going to be a lawyer. So for you to admit that, it's wonderful.
You guys, maybe that's why I'm not practicing law anymore, because I was a failure. But no, I stopped all the crossing T's and dotting I's about the time the second and third kids show up. You know how that goes. It just gets crazier and crazier. And so, so there's even yesterday for those of you who use Dropbox, I was having Dropbox challenges and they were laughing at me in our office. They're like, bless it, she can't even make Dropbox quotes. So, there's grace abounding.
So do you have any idea? So you mentioned a couple of years you've been doing this. Do you know how many podcasts you've done at this point?
That's a great question. I don't know why I haven't looked back, but I'm guessing, probably 70 or 80, but I'm probably completely wrong in it. We've released, once a week, we release them every Thursday, and it's a guest that we have on. And then on Mondays, we release a short one. And it goes with our prayer journal where we just pray for our kids on Monday mornings. And usually it's 5-10 minutes where I just kind of talk about whatever the attribute of the week is. And it gives us, I pray over our families and our kids. And so twice a week during the school year, but yeah, it's been a fun journey.
That's great. And do you have any podcast, maybe one or two, that have really stood out to you so far? Not necessarily asking about your favorite guest, but any surprises or things along the way?
There was this woman, Amy Parker.
The check is in the mail.
Yes, Amy, didn't I interview you in Nashville? Was that right?
Yes. It was so fun. And you gave me cookies. So note to our producer, we really should give all of our guests cookies just so that I can have one.
My goodness, we were really on our game that day. We were, yes. I loved it. I remember leaving Nashville and thinking, why is it that I live in Dallas? And still thinking that, but
why? Yes, come on.
It's funny. I have so many different podcasts that have meant something to me in different ways. I'm always, whenever I just had Christine Kane on a couple of days ago, she always speaks truth into my own life individually. I have to break out of that and think, I wonder if anybody else cares about what we're talking about, because she's talking to me, but she's amazing. But, there's this one podcast, and he's coming on again tomorrow for the second time, but his name is Darren Kinder, and he's in the Secret Service. He is in the Secret Service. He lives in Dallas, just a friend, and he travels with dignitaries and presidents, all that good stuff. And he was in New York City as Secret Service on 9/11. And he was in a meeting around the corner from the trade centers. And I'll give you a quick overview, but you can go listen because he's amazing. But here's the basis of it that I think just has such great application for all of us. When the first plane hit, he was able to get into the building and start helping people get out. And then it was out and it collapsed. And then he went to the second building, same thing, was able to get out. It collapsed. He was makeshift fireman, even received presidential awards, medals. And just for all that he did that day. But evening, he got word that the Secret Service was all back together in a meeting place. And they said, you need to come. And so he's getting back over there. Now, imagine what he looks like, right? His suit's torn. His shoes are melted to his feet. He's bloody, all this. And he walks into this room of the Secret Service, and they see him and they see what he looks like. And there they are sitting there in their suits from the morning. And they said, where have you been? And looking at their clean suits, he said, where have you been? And his testimony is, I don't want to go to heaven with a clean suit. And I think that's one of the most profound moments I've had just listening to a podcast thinking, isn't that right? Like, I don't want to go to heaven with a clean suit. I don't want my kids to go to heaven with a clean suit. Like, let's get in there. Where are the places that God's going to call us that are difficult, that are hard and unexpected, where we don't feel like we have God's favor, but we know biblically we do? How do we get in, dig in there, live the lives that God has called us to, knowing that it's times such as this, right, that we're here? And so that's kind of a long answer to your question, but I think that's one of the most profound podcasting moments I've had with Darren. And so he's on mine again. We're taping Monday. It'll be coming out for 9/11, and it'll be the second time. And he said, I have a new topic I want to talk about. And I said, that's great, but don't think I'm not going back to 9/11. So anyway, he's amazing.
Is wonderful. Oh my goodness.
And so there's also a blog element of this that you're in charge of, which you mentioned, and you have a number of recent posts on, the topic of COVID and this pandemic and how we're all surviving the unknowns that kids are facing. So can you just talk a little bit about that and share some of those thoughts that you're currently sharing through your blog?
Sure. Well, I think COVID's just one of those things. I mean, not a one of us read that What to Expect When You're Expecting book and got the chapter on the pandemic, right? Where was that? And
I remember that book.
Yes. And so here we are in the middle of this pandemic, and I'd like to be the first to point out that there is no continuity in how I'm parenting this whatsoever. I say yes to things I shouldn't. I say no to things I probably, so what I think I've been, and not to mention, if I might add this, during that first few months, remember when we were all totally quarantined and not getting out, might I mention that I was the parent that was like, nobody goes to the hospital, nobody gets hurt, everybody were staying home. I kind of took that approach. In that time, I just need you to know that I had my first ever emergency surgery.
Oh my goodness.
I know. So I was in the hospital and I got to go by ambulance. How about that? My little one hurt his finger. He had a surgery at the hospital. We had a fire truck come because my husband had an unfortunate tree trimming event up, and it doesn't even matter. We had a case.
That's a UTTE. That's what that is.
We had
unfortunate tree trimming event.
We had a raging case of lice in a few kids. Sorry, y'all.
Oh.
I don't even know how you get lice when you're home in quarantine. I'm not even good there.
From the hospital.
One thing after another, and it became comical. We were like, oh my goodness, you guys. But here's what, through it all, I think the bigger messaging is this, is we can only control what we can control. And so if we're going to control the controllables, then what we can do is control the narrative and the messaging in our homes. And that's my very best thoughts on how to do that. And while everybody's struggling and there's anxiety and all these things that people suffer from right now, and they're all real, I get that. We can stop and we can go back to what we say we believe, and we can talk to our kids about it. And what does that look like? And I may not know the answers, but I don't know, but is kind of where we go with this in my house. But I know God's faithful, and here's how I've seen it. And I think these have just been opportunities to speak into the narrative of our homes, encourage our kids in the things of the Lord, teach them resiliency, right? Teach them how in hard times that God uses those as big opportunities. I just think there's these great places to speak truth in their lives when I don't, have to take them to the hospital, or I don't want to kill someone because they're driving me crazy because they're all in my hair. But that's kind of been the approach that we've been talking about in our blog and just on Christian parenting, is just control what you can control. Parent the bigger picture during these times. What do you want your kids to be when they're 20? What are we doing today to get them there, right? And then I always say, just be the person that builds up what others tear down. Because I don't know about you, but I'm watching it on blogs, on social media, on even the boards at our school, all the different places where people have lots of opinions, right? But nobody knows how to do this right except the Lord. And so let's build up what others are tearing down. When the technology's breaking down, when your kid's not in school how you want them, when the teacher's not getting, whatever it is, let's build it up in the Lord. And I think that's just that's how we've approached it in my house.
That's wonderful. Well, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back on the Bible for Kids with Cynthia Yanof. Give generously, save wisely, live appropriately. Don't you wish you knew how to handle and manage your money better when you were a teenager? Do you want to provide the teens in your life with a tool to help them better prepare for the future? In the Money Challenge for Teens, author Art Rayner introduces readers to some fictional young friends who are navigating financial waters and learning how God would want them to face college choices and car loans and thoughts about retirement. Yes, even as a teenager. While reading about the fictional friends' steps and missteps, readers will learn simple, practical lessons and adopt real-life goals to start their journey to a healthy and godly financial future. And check out Art's other titles as well: The Money Challenge, The Marriage Challenge, and Find More Money, all available everywhere books are sold. Author April Graney is back with her new kids' book, The Marvelous Maker. For a limited time, buy The Marvelous Maker at Lifeway.com and receive The Marvelous Mud House for free. Here's a taste of the book.
The beginning was good. All was as it should be for Adamus and Genevieve, until dark desire filled their eyes, and they gave in to the tricky tempter's lies. But the Maker heard their cries and humbly took on flesh, vowing to the tempter, "I'm not finished with you yet." Creation, fall, redemption, and the hope of final restoration. The Marvelous Maker by April Graney, available everywhere books are sold.
Okay, favorite listeners, we are always giving something away. Free books, yay! So to win, check out our instructions on Instagram and Facebook at The Bible for Kids, and just look for The Bible for Kids podcast at Google or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Welcome back to the Bible for Kids podcast, and we're speaking with Cynthia Yanof.
So Cynthia, was there a point in your life when you felt just called to ministry? I mean, to using your voice to help parents and kids? Did you do that throughout your legal career as well? Or did you feel that nagging throughout your legal career? Or was there a clear-cut line that said, okay, I'm ending my legal career and starting my ministry? Or was it something that's just been there all along?
It's funny. I feel like the Lord's spoken ministry into my life, like all of our lives. You know, from the beginning of time. My mom has been on church staff forever. My parents have always raised us that way in serving. And so I feel like the Lord has spoken ministry, maybe not occupationally, but spoken ministry into my life for years. And so I just have loved the opportunity where he said, you know, you need to work with this ministry and feed hungry kids in the summer. We've done that 12 years where we make 400 sack lunches in my house every Tuesday for the food bank. Like these places where I feel like he's spoken ministry. But I think really when I felt that tug, like I need to walk away from law, was, like I said, kind of when I was back in that downtown Dallas office building, and I just felt like suddenly just that sense of this isn't it anymore. And so, you know, what's hard, I think, I've been studying that verse, fix your eyes on what is unseen, not what was seen, because what is unseen is eternal, what is seen is temporary, right? I like what's seen. I do not care for what's unseen. When the Lord, I think that's when the ministry angle, like more on a full-time basis came in, was just when I felt like the Lord was saying, like, I've got something different. And that's the beauty of, you know, that's my story, but that's everybody's story, is that the Lord, he's working in ways that we don't understand, we don't see. And just because it wasn't A to B for me, like I tell my kids, my senior in high school is applying to colleges right now, and she can't decide on a major. I'm like, girl, I know that they're going to make you put something down, but it doesn't matter. We will figure it out later. God has a plan for you. It was preordained before you ever walked this earth. And we're going to trust that. And when he closes college doors or whatever that is, then we're not going to sweat it. And I think just knowing that God's working in our lives and in mine, I just knew he wanted something different. And so in that unseen was where I had to say, okay, Lord, I'm just going to give that to you. And I'm going to leave a job that frankly paid a lot of our bills and was really safe and really had a sense of, status isn't the right word, but that sense of accomplishment maybe is the right word, and walk away. And, you know, it was my partnership year at our law firm, and my partners that I work for were like, what are you doing? For you? And I was like, I just feel called to something else. And so that's kind of how it's looked in my life. And even in that, just encouragement for anyone that's feeling called to do something completely different. It hasn't been the easy road. Like in the middle of that has also been like a call into foster care. And we did that. And that's one of the hardest things I think my family's ever done, but the best thing we've ever done. But then lots of ups and downs and successes and failures. And I'm sure that will continue. So just encouragement to all of you that if you feel like the Lord's just speaking a different path into you, don't assume that path will be just the straight line. It's all going well. Just, pardon the mess, walk with it in what it looks like. But having been in God's plan for my life, and many times, like all of us been outside of God's plan for my life, we know where we want to be. Stay in God's will. It's the spot for you, for sure.
Yeah. And it's so funny. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, encourage your daughter about her major. I was a biology major, but then ended up an animated cucumber. So it can go many different ways.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I tell her that. She said the other day, both of my two, my middle and my older, both said something about law school. And I was like, I wanted to be like, don't do it.
Well, and it's so funny, specifically talking to you, how you went from law school to ministry. And I'm currently going from, a career as an author, which I don't plan to quit, but I'm also going to law school as well. So just, his plans and goals for us can be completely opposite or completely different. But just trusting that and following where he leads is the most important thing. Whether you're an undergrad or old like me and going back to school, or stopping that career that you work so hard for and just following his call. All of it is just dependent upon him and where he leads and his plans. They don't look the same.
Yeah, well, for sure. And I'm excited. I've been watching you on social. I'm excited about your law school. Feel free to call me. I'm sure I don't remember anything from 1997 when I passed the bar. But nonetheless, I think that it's just such a gift when the Lord lets us do that. And who knows if he'll draw me back towards some sort of law. With my kids, I keep saying, you can use law for ministry. I wasn't in that side of it, but I love that there's so much opportunities to do that. And so that's exciting. Yeah. And Amy, back to this book writing. I don't know why we haven't written Night Night Mess. And part the mess. And that's on my list next time I see you, to say, hey, there's lots of messes we can say goodnight to. So tuck that away on your law school nights when you're studying, and then you have a brainstorming idea. There you go.
When you close your eyes, the mess in your room goes away. That's what
yes.
Yes. Wouldn't that be magical if we could just night mess, just leave the dishes in the sink?
Cynthia, you touched on this, but I'd love to share something that you wrote back in 2018 in your blog. For the last 5 years, we prayed for the Lord's guidance in our role with orphan care. We had spent a lifetime being pro-birth, but with 31,000 children in foster care in Texas, we knew it was now time to be pro-life and get down to the business of doing our part to care for these children. So can you tell us a little bit more, you touched on it, about your experience with foster care and adoption?
Yes, absolutely. We started foster care just because we felt like the Lord kept speaking it to us. And again, I am not overly spiritual more than anyone else. Like, I just feel like the Lord is having to speak really clearly and loudly to me because I'm not the quickest study in town. And so this was one of those where everything I saw, I read, I heard pointed to foster care. And I was like, oh no, like that's for the people that really love Jesus. I'm not sure. And apparently I was the girl at that time. And so my husband and I both separately kind of came to that and started praying over it, and never intending to adopt. And so we signed up for foster care and did all the classes, and, they home study you. Basically, you figure out you live in a death trap. You never knew it. And your whole house. And then in came, we said ages 3 and up. And so it's very, thinking we'd get an older kiddo. And in came the first day that we were active in foster care, in came a 2-month-old little one. And he has been in our house ever since. And, the thing about foster care is that is never really the story. Unification, reunification is always the goal. But this was just meant to be our kiddo. And we fell in love with him. And it was hard road, ups and downs. And we packed him up to leave several times, and the court at the last minute didn't. And it was very difficult. But, I always tell people, like, going into foster care, I just was... it's one of those where you're called into something. You're like, really, Lord, let's rediscuss this. And I was really nervous about what it was going to do for our family. Very fearful because I have two healthy, great adjusted kids, and my husband and I had a great marriage, do have a great marriage. But I just remember being really scared about what this might look like and do to our family. And now on the other side of it, my testimony is I'm scared of who we would be if we had not done it.
Yeah.
Like we are changed people. Because my kids have sat in CPS offices and seen kids with everything they own in trash bags in parts of town they would have never been in before. And they have loved a child that had nothing to offer back. Of course, now he's everything. We adore him. But just doing something that the Lord called you to. I mean, I think there's just no better. I can talk all day about what the Lord can do in our lives and how he loves the orphans and the homeless. And he stands up for racial injustice but just to live it and walk it and see his hand every single day so faithfully in our families. What a gift. And so people say to us all the time, like, oh my goodness, like that's huge. Y'all do that. That's amazing. I'm like, step away from that. Like we got more than anyone could ever ask for, not to mention our little one. And, one quick aside, when we got him, his name was Josue, which is Joshua in Spanish. And then when we were able to adopt him a couple of years later, we just changed it to English to Joshua. We call him his initials, JB, Joshua Bo. But, Joshua means God saves. And I just know that his mom probably did not appreciate when his sweet teenage mama, when she had him, did not probably appreciate naming her child Josue, but I know the significance of Joshua and God saves and what he did for this little kiddo in our lives. And so just been a huge gift. Thanks for asking. We just love all things foster care.
That's amazing.
And so parents praying with their kids, that's another topic that you're very passionate about. I'm sure there was a lot of praying that happened in your journey through foster care as well. But tell us about Marked by Prayer.
Yeah, Marked by Prayer kind of came, whenever I write something, it comes from a place of me not knowing or not doing something well. And so I never try to write out of expertise because I have very little. And so I truly, when I'm struggling with something, I'm like, well, if I am, I bet most people are. So Marked by Prayer is our second year of a prayer journal we've written. I wrote it for, you can find it at Christian Parenting or pardonthemess.org, either one. But the goal was to start and pray for our kids the first week of school through the last. So we start after Labor Day. Everybody's school starts a different time. But each week we're praying a different attribute over our kids together. And so I'm just going to read you just a couple of the weeks so you know kind of what we're praying. But we're praying the things that the Lord has them, like praying that they're marked by confidence. They're marked by purity, marked by God's presence and self-discipline, surrender, refinement, armor. So each week we'll pray a different attribute over them. And there's just a place for you to journal, to write down what you're praying for your kids. And the hope would be it's a quick, organized way to remember to pray the deeper things of the Lord for your kids. But also, if you just take quick notes, I'm a horrible journaler, but if you can take quick notes at the end of the year to be able to look back and say, hey, I was praying for you, Brett and Kate, on October 5th that you would whatever. And look how the Lord's been faithful. And just being able to start stacking those stones of remembrance. And so that's the heart between Marked by Prayer, our newest prayer journal. And I'm super excited. It's out. We're starting in a couple weeks. We'll have our Monday morning podcast that follows it. So it'll be good.
Well, just one last thing. And, I remember as a young parent, and it's been a while, seeing our newborn daughter and 3 years later, our newborn son, and thinking, how in the world am I supposed to do this? There's no instruction manual for these, taking him home. And at least when I buy a new coffee maker, it comes with a step-by-step instructions for making the perfect coffee. Which, by the way, I just bought a new coffee maker yesterday, so that's what.
Woo! There you go.
So, but how can you encourage parents who might be in that place of feeling overwhelmed with the task of raising a child?
Yeah. I think that just give yourself a little grace, because I think we're all overwhelmed at any given moment. And don't line up what you're doing with what you're seeing on social media. We know that that's a highlight reel. And so we just step back from that and trust that if God is faithful to give you the kids that you have and to let you parent this time, that he's going to guide you in that. From the beginning of time, from the time of Adam and Eve up till the second coming, anytime in there, God could have chosen you to be a parent. But he chose for right now, during COVID, during all that's going on. He picked you for now with these kids. And so if he's going to call you into this, he's going to equip you. That's just how he works. We know biblically That's how he works. So go back to the basics. Parent the bigger picture. Parent what you want them to be long-term. And then all the other little things along the way, not saying there's not some significant points in there. Absolutely. But also know that we serve a God that he redeems. And so for every time that the ball is dropped, we can trust him to be able to pick that up and run with it and do it better than we ever could. So just have grace for yourself. Have grace for your kids. We're all going to be okay. Deep breaths. COVID, nobody saw it coming, but we're going to do this. And so be encouraged, but also join a network of people, whether that's your church or small group. Join with us at Christian Parenting and listen to the podcast network. Take opportunities to really get together with other believers that are walking that road with you and be encouraged together in the Lord.
That's a great, strong message to end on there. Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And listeners, you know that we are always giving away free stuff on our socials, so don't forget to follow us on Instagram or Facebook at The Bible for Kids or at our website, thebibleforkids.com.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much. You have a great day.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Thanks for listening to the Bible for Kids podcast with Amy Parker and Mike Naraki. Be sure to connect with The Bible for Kids on Instagram, Facebook, and at thebibleforkids.com. The Bible for Kids podcast is powered by the Christian Parenting Podcast Network. Find out more at christianparenting.org. Our show is also available on waynation.com.
Christian Parenting.